Okay, so we're recording now, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We are here to talk about the exciting Radnor Trail extension, and we're recording this meeting, so if you know anyone who is not able to attend, please let them know that they can watch it at their leisure. I will get a recording of it and send it out to everyone that we sent the meeting to, just so they have it. And yeah, I'm really excited to kick this off to Steve Norsini. He's going to talk first, and then Bob Tate about what's going on with what they're digging up right now. So do you want to talk about that, Steve?
Great, thank you, Commissioner. And I'll just make a couple of introductions. I don't know where he is on your screen, but to my right is Dennis Capella. He's our engineering project manager. Commissioner Lisa Borowski is also on, and we thank her for coming on board. You'll be hearing from Bob Thomas in a little bit. So obviously, Commissioner Jones and Borowski are our elected officials. Dennis and I are employees of the township. Bob Thomas and his firm were selected by the Board of Commissioners to do this work. And we're very fortunate to have Bob on board from back in his days of the original Radnor Trail. His depth and breadth of knowledge is massive. He's highly regarded in the trails and paths and biking genre, if you will. So Bob is a great guy, and he does a great job for the township. He's helped us get some grants, which have been fantastic. So just a couple points of housekeeping, if I may, and I think everybody's already doing it. We would ask that if you're not speaking, if you could just please mute your microphone, but keep your camera on if you wish. Also, just to keep everything more or less in line and everybody gets the same answer, I'm going to send out Dennis's email, and I'm going to ask that everybody who has a question from now and moving forward to email Dennis Capella. And that way, there's some things that we're going to be able to answer. There's other things that Bob Thomas will have to answer. But in this way, everything gets funneled through the same fashion, and we'll always copy Commissioner Jones on questions and responses. And I'm going to pass it over to Bob in a minute. Just a couple of quick things. There's going to be some decisions that have to be made ultimately by the Board of Commissioners with recommendations from staff. One is concerning the access to the trail from the existing Radnor Trail, and you're going to see it as an at-grade crossing, which means you cross Radnor Chester Road. But we will provide to the Board of Commissioners options for what Bob had already studied, which was for lack of a better term, a culvert or tunnel under the street, and even a bridge over it. And those are large decisions that have sizable funding impacts that will ultimately be made by the board, as well as I think everybody's aware, and I know they want to hear more about some of the contaminated soil we have on the site and how that's dealt with, and whether it's excavated and taken out or capped. Both are valid methods, but Bob will be talking about that. Also, so I have Dennis's email up in the chat for everybody to see. Thank you, Dennis, for volunteering. And also, and as we go on, we definitely would request, if possible, that you could hold your questions to the end. But if there's a really hot topic that you really wish to get an answer to right in the middle of, because that's really going to make a difference on how we move forward, please just in the lower part of your screen under reactions, there's a raise your hand item. I have my hand raised, and we'll take it in that fashion. So I'm going to stop talking and kick it off to Bob Thomas.
Okay, fine. I'm going to share my screen. All right, everyone should be able to see that. Let me just minimize the pictures. Okay. Commissioner, can you see the screen? Hello?
Yes, we
Yes,
can
I
see
can
it.
see it.
Okay,
I
good.
can
And
see it.
I can hear people talking then, fine. Okay, well, thank you very much for taking the time this evening. We're going to have a very short presentation to leave lots of time for your questions and for discussion. As you heard earlier, about 10, 12 years ago, there were lots of different trail projects taking place in our Delaware Valley. That's the 5 Pennsylvania counties and the 4 New Jersey counties that are part of our regional planning network. And the William Penn Foundation was helping with a lot of them. And they got very frustrated. And they said, you know, we're getting all these applications for this and that, and we can't prioritize them. So I was brought into the team to help create a rational circuit, as it ended up being called, of the regional trail network. And one of the things that I made certain was that the Radnor Trail was part of that. And what you'll see in the next slide is that the site, here we are in Philadelphia. Here you go up. If you've been up in New Hope, you know that the canal towpath is part of the system. Near Radnor's the Chester Valley Trail. And there are a bunch of other trails, the East Coast Greenway, the Valley Forge Heights Refuge Trail, which includes the Radnor Trail, and in Eastern Delaware County and the 4 other counties. So there's a lot going on. Here's to put things further in context, you can see Radnor Trail extension here. That's the existing Radnor Trail. And the solid lines are trails that exist, and the dashed ones are trails that are proposed or under development. And I'm glad to say that the map is actually wrong. This has been completed. This has been completed. You know, lots of things are happening. This is getting completed this year. But the question that came up, the Radnor Trail opened and it was very successful, got a lot of use. And a lot of people said, gee, you know, it's beautiful. We love it. We see our neighbors, you know, it's enjoyable. I walk my dog, I go with my kids, or I just go jogging myself, but it's pretty short. Where can it go? And so we took a look at that and said, well, why don't we do something? It's always easier to get big federal dollars if you connect federal sites. So we have Valley Forge National Historical Park and the John Heinz National Wildlife Refuge. And we came up with the idea of linking the Schuylkill River Trail here at Valley Forge and the Horseshoe Trail through Upper Merion and Tredyffrin Township to the Chester Valley Trail and down to Sugartown Road, joining into Radnor Township and on the existing Radnor Trail. And then we've been working to extend it eastward across the Blue Route. And then I'll explain more about going down along the SEPTA high-speed line where there's extra space, and then joining Cobbs Creek Valley and following that down. A lot of the Cobbs Creek Trail has been completed all the way down to Woodland Avenue, and the gaps are being filled right now down to John Heinz. And that is part of the East Coast Greenway. I mean, this network goes all over the place, but this shows you where, you know, the Radnor Trail is not just an isolated local trail. So the major milestones in the development is the ramp and trail design, environmental. There's been some environmental testing of the site. There's erosion and sedimentation design review and the permit. This has been completed already as part of our initial contract for the extension. What that does, it looks at the earthwork that's taking place, looks at all the drainage, et cetera, and we had to go through the Delaware County Conservation District to get those permits. The design is about 90% done. We held off pending the current analysis that's going on with arsenic. Now, what that's all about is that, and I'll show you plans in a moment, in the plans that we did about 3 years ago, there was some testing done, or not testing, some testing, and a look at the history of the trail area. And what was discovered was that there are some evidences of arsenic. And where could that have come from? It might have been used as a weed control. It might have been used as part of the preservation technique for the railroad ties that were there. And what the report recommended was to determine not just where this samples were found, but how deep are they? And what happened just at the very last week in January, we had our geologist, Rocco Mercuri with Gilmore and Associates, went out again And there were samples taken down to different depths to determine how deep the arsenic contamination is. Those samples are now in a laboratory. They're being reviewed. We should get a report either next week, at the end of February, or very early in March. And then we'll know not just the linear extent, but also the depth. And what will happen at that point is we can analyze what's the best way of taking care of it. Steve Norsini mentioned that there are two principal methods. One is to cap it, which has been done on a lot of trails. Many trails, as you know, are rail trails and have contamination of all sorts of things. And that's easy to do if you use asphalt for the trail paving, as was done on the previous section, the original section of the Radnor Trail. The other approach, if it's not that deep, would be to excavate the contaminated soil, and it's removed and treated properly, and it's no longer an environmental problem. Obviously, if we move some of the soil, we're going to have to change our plans to reflect the different grades of the trail. If we're taking out a couple feet of soil, we're going to have to take a good look at that. So the last thing that we need to do, our plans are about 90% complete. We've paused until we get the report and decision is made on ameliorating the arsenic contamination. We'll finish the trail extension. PS&E just means plans, specifications, and estimate. That's what PennDOT requires. This right-of-way that we're using was a rail line. Many of you know the history of the Philadelphia and Western Railroad. It was bought by the Pennsylvania Department of Highways in the mid-1950s. That's now PennDOT, and PennDOT has been very good about actually building the Radnor Trail initially and turning that over to the township. This extension is being built by the township and managed by the township, and PennDOT is making this right-of-way available. The reason they've done that is it was originally acquired to build the proposed Wayne bypass, which is not going to happen. So as a result, they want to see this transportation corridor used for something, not just a dump or a place for, you know, weedy growth or invasives or whatever. So once we get the arsenic report and once the township makes a decision, our hope is to finish the drawings, and I'll show you where they are right now, get a final review with PennDOT, ideally put it out to bid at the end of this year, 2022, and with the idea of bidding and negotiating and going into construction services a year from now, the beginning of spring of next year of 2023. So let's take a look at the location in more detail. Here you see Lancaster Avenue or Lancaster Pike. You have the Radnor Trail coming here and ending at Radnor Chester Road. Originally, there was a train station here, and from Radnor Chester Road, you went down a whole bunch of steps, and the railroad actually went underneath Radnor Chester Road. When we built the first section of trail, it was decided to build a ramp, so this was actually filled up to the road. And we did take a look in the design that we started back in it would have been 18, 19 with the design at going underneath Radnor Chester Road with a culvert, keeping the ramp and perhaps ramping down on this side. And there was even a question, would it be possible to build a bridge over Radnor Chester Road? Well, the bridge really went away pretty quickly, because if Radnor Chester Road is at a certain elevation and the trail on both sides is down at a low elevation, and you have to build ramps to go to a bridge that would have a 17-foot highway clearance, this bridge it would look like the Ben Franklin Bridge in the middle of Radnor Township, and it would be very expensive. Also, one of the things we wanted to assure is not only that we got over or under Radnor Chester Road, but the township is building this wonderful trail system network for the whole
Bob,
township.
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. We had a
Sure.
request on the chat to zoom in. I apologize for interrupting, but
Oh,
honestly,
well,
for my
here's
eyes,
the next slide is going to zoom in.
there we go.
All righty. So,
Thank you.
okay, what we'll do then is, that's why we have that slide. I'll just point out the big picture here, and then we'll go to the detailed slide in just a moment. So the TAP trail connects with the Radnor Trail, goes down, as you know, goes along paralleling Lancaster Avenue around the high school, goes up and has a branch to the Norristown High Speed Line station, the Radnor station on the high speed line, and then it goes up here to the Radnor Regional Rail Station. It also is planned to go here. There's a underpass, believe it or not, underneath the Blue Route in this ramp, which gets you over into this area and continues. So to look at, and here's the extension of the Radnor Trail, the way that we're looking. I'll show this in an enlargement in just a sec to get over here, and then we would use the rail bed that's still there on this side. And then I'll talk about how the trail would continue along the Norristown high-speed line. But let's zoom in as requested. And what you see, and then I'll go back to the overall picture. What you see is the Radnor Trail coming up here to Radnor Chester Road, having a crossing at grade. And in determining which of these alternatives was most feasible, we worked with PennDOT. They did a quick analysis and determined that even though Radnor Chester Road is a busy road, they were satisfied that there were safe sight lines, that the speeds were, even though it seemed everybody talks about cars going by at 100 miles an hour, they looked at all the speeds, and they said that a crossing at grade there with perhaps, not for sure, but perhaps like a flashing beacon, that's where there's not a traffic light. But if you come up here, and you've probably seen this on other trails, if you come up to the road and you want to cross, you press a button, and then there's a flashing beacon that goes on and alerts traffic to stop while you cross, and then you continue. So we'd have a ramp that would come down here into this railroad cut and then continue on the rail bed, and it would go to a cul-de-sac, temporary cul-de-sac right here at the limited access right-of-way line for the Blue Route, eventually extending beyond that. Okay, so let's just go back to this overall picture. It was very interesting when we first looked at the Radnor Trail back in the early 80s. One of the things we discovered, PennDOT still had the plans from which they had acquired the railroad. And one thing we discovered was that this rail line that went from 69th Street originally to Stratford, this line to Norristown was built a few years later after the railroad opened. But they planned to have a 4-track rail line to compete with the Pennsylvania Railroad. The Vanderbilt interests were involved. They were building a bridge across the Susquehanna River. The plan was to go to Ogden, Utah. I mean, this was the age of railroads and competition, and it was pretty cutthroat. Well, when they built the trail, when they built the railroad, you'll notice if you look at the bridges that are there, the bridges are long enough to cover 4 tracks, not just 2 tracks. And what they did was to build tracks 3 and 4. They never built tracks 1 and 2. So we've been in discussions with STEPA for several years about bringing the trail down and actually having a rail with trail. And we're involved in a feasibility study now that's going along slowly, but from time to time, taking a more detailed look. We've done an analysis of it, and that's something we're taking up with SEPTA on behalf of the Valley Forge Heights Refuge Trail, because that actually continues into Haverford Township.
Bob, I'm going to interrupt again. Another question, and I apologize for doing this, but I guess
not at all.
No,
we're here for a discussion.
Question. I'm sorry, I'm confused. Is the green line on an existing street or between houses on Radnor Chester Road? So maybe that'll be answered when Bob zooms in a little, but I just want to make you aware of that question.
Well, here, let's go back to the Zoom. Yeah, this is over an aerial photograph. The green line is not on an existing road. This is the existing trail, which is on the rail bed. The green line here is on the rail bed, and the railroad from Radnor Chester Road down to about here is in a cut below the level of the houses on either side. And then after the houses, this is Martha Brown's Woods. It's on an embankment and has a big culvert that goes underneath Brown's Run, this little stream here that's a branch of Island Creek. And then when it gets over here, then it gets to being in a cut again. Okay. So yeah, here you can see in more detail, this is a map of the parcels and the streets. And here where we're showing, this was showing when we were thinking, this was one of the other alternatives of going underneath. Now with the tap trail here, the trail would remain up here, go and then come down a ramp, all within the PennDOT right of way. We're not looking at the need to use anyone's land for any purpose. When we do this, we'll probably build a ramp first so that the vehicles can get down. One of the other reasons why the culvert was unattractive, aside from the cost. Normally, initially, we looked at a culvert for a trail, you know, that can handle pedestrians and bicycles, and even the size it's used for horses. But because of the need to get big trucks in here, and the really very difficult situation of having access for large trucks. I mean, this is a very sensitive area of Martha Brown's Woods or Radnor Township School District property. Then you all have homes in here. There's really no way to come in from Lancaster Pike. So we want to come down here. If we wanted to have a culvert underneath, this culvert would have to be big enough to allow triaxle trucks, the construction trucks that carry lots of gravel and dirt and so forth. And that raised the cost of the culvert considerably, about 3 times what it would have been for a trail culvert. So that was a factor. The other was we looked at utilities that are underneath the road. That was a big issue. There's a major water line, gas line. You can see on the east side of Radnor Chester Road, there's a gas line that actually comes up out of the ground, goes over and goes back in. That's because it was on the parapet of the bridge that used to take Radnor Chester Road over the rail bed.
Bob, I'm going to interrupt, and I apologize. I'll be doing this all
Not at
night.
all,
So,
please.
2 things. My optometrist says my eyes are 20/20 with glasses. I don't believe her because I'm struggling with this. I don't know if you can enlarge that a little bit. I hope that helps somebody else.
Let me see, Control Plus.
And then we also have a question in the chat. Would you leave the current pedestrian crosswalk at the bottom of Radnor Chester and have a crosswalk where the trail would connect? Would you leave the current pedestrian crosswalk at the bottom of Radnor Chester and have a crosswalk where the trail would connect?
The one at the bottom you're talking about is near Chew Lane. Yes, that will remain. And then you would also need a crosswalk here for people going straight across here to the trail. Let me see about enlarging this.
Like I say, my optometrist says I'm 20/20 with glasses, but I'm
So also, I don't mean to interrupt too and add more, but
No,
you
no,
can
go
also
ahead.
enlarge, if you have a touch screen, you can enlarge by touching the screen and spreading it with your fingers.
Yes,
If you have a touch.
this unfortunately, this screen does not do that. But
No,
there's
but I'm saying like us as viewers, we can do
the
that.
viewers can do that. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like on your
And
laptop.
If you have
Bob,
a
I don't know if
touchscreen.
you know how to do this. You can also do that by going to slideshow up on the top there in the menu.
Yes.
Slideshow should take it out of.
Yeah, Bob, at the very
mode,
top on
yeah.
the orange bar.
Yep.
There should be.
Yeah, I got it right there.
start
Slideshow.
And then from current slide at the left there.
Yep. That does it a bit. Very good. That helps a bit. I can certainly read a lot better. I mean, I can screen grab this and then enlarge this particular slide. Take me a moment. Does that help? Steve?
I'm sorry. Yeah, that works. Yes, for me. Hopefully it works for the audience too. They might all have been able to see it. That might just have been me.
May I
Yeah.
interject a rather basic question that I should probably know the answer of?
No,
Is
no.
Is the extension from the proposed extension that goes, however it goes, from Radnor Chester further, I guess, east or whatever,
Yeah.
has that been approved? Is that already a thing, or is that still under consideration?
Oh, no, it's received let's say, the funding sources that have already put the money up for it would not have done that if it was not on the township plan and had not been approved by PennDOT. In order to get that funding applications, we had to show that there was a agreement to do this.
And did residents have any, did I miss the
Oh,
vote
yes,
on
there
that?
was a long feasibility process that began in, I guess, 2014. We had probably 8 meetings. We had small meetings like this as well as large ones, and we also talked to people individually.
Hmm.
And then the feasibility study was received by the township. I realize these projects can take a long time, and you often find yourself, it certainly happened to me in my own neighborhood, getting involved in something that's been going on for a long time. And It's unfortunate, but no, this did go through a very thorough process of vetting before anyone would give any money for this, for design and construction. They wanted to know that it was on the plans and approved, and there had been we had to document all the public involvement and so forth. So the best I can do is, make up by answering any questions or discussing anything you want to bring up. That's
So in
fine.
other words, it was approved without having concluded the best way to cross Radnor Chester, as an example.
Oh, but the answer is the alignment was approved, right? That it would cross Radnor Chester, that it would go now. Just so you feel more comfortable, in the approval, right, and in the funding says, well, you still have to get your plans approved. I mean, for example, you could buy a piece of land, if this was for sale and you bought it and you got an approval to build 3 houses, right? You could get money from a bank to do that, but you'd still have to get the plans for the houses approved and go through all the issues of the driveway and the street trees and everything else. So we're at the stage where I talked about, final design of doing all those things. And when we do, that will also be brought to the public.
So
Which is
Bob,
we're having this meeting right now to update you as to where things are.
Bob, I'm going to jump in with some comments from some questions from folks.
Sure, go ahead.
And again, I do apologize for always jumping in. So are you familiar with the level of traffic that we see on Radnor Chester Road with 2
Yes, I am.
crosswalks? Is this not inviting more congestion, especially with a blinking light at the end of the existing crosswalk? And then I'm going to add the next one in because they're along the same lines. What is the plan for safe access by neighboring residents walking on Radnor Chester? I respectfully disagree that this is a safe road to walk on. And lastly, I don't remember being contacted and my property is at the confluence. So it seemed all the questions were really regarding, and I'm going to jump in here on one thing. So what Bob Thomas has put forth is PennDOT is fine with us with what we call an at-grade crossing. This is a PennDOT road. As if you live there, you know that this is a state road. The plan as you see it will show that at-grade crossing, but ultimately we will go to the board and we will show them projected costs. They will be high level, but we will show them, and Bob made very valid points. If we were to put a pedestrian bridge in, there's an incredible amount of grading that goes forth. If we put a tunnel or culvert underneath, there's a host of issues with that. But the manager wanted to make sure that the board is aware there are 3 options. This option may be the one that we're pointing to as, the most feasible and still be safe, but we will show those options to the board when the time comes. And if that causes a shift in design, we will do so. And I'll let Bob talk to those other questions.
If I may, Steve, there's actually 2 options as far as tunneling is concerned. One is the wide tunnel that Bob described, enough to fit a truck, but there may be a more narrow option that may be a little less expensive.
So if you go to Chesterbrook, where my previous office was, because of the proximity to the park, and Wilson Farm Park had horses, they actually have, and in Valley Forge Park, you'll see the equestrian crossings. They're high, narrow tunnels, right? Not that we would put that there, but there are options. But I'm sorry, I will toss this back to.
Yeah, let's take those good questions one at a time. What was the first one?
So the first one was, are you familiar with the level of traffic that we see on Radnor Chester Road with 2 crosswalks? Is this not inviting more congestion, especially with the blinking light at the end of the existing walk?
Okay, yes, and the answer is that we reviewed this thoroughly with PennDOT. And what the reality is, and they saw this also, is that this is not a crosswalk like at, I don't know, Wayne Avenue and Lancaster Pike. The volume of pedestrian and bicycle traffic on this trail is such that there may be 15 or 20 minutes between when people come here. You're talking about, probably at the most several hundred people a day. But if you take several hundred people, divide that by, let's say 200 and divide it by 15, That's, how many people an hour, and then, and some of them are coming in bunches. So they did not feel that this would create a problem in that regard. As far as the issue of the rest of Radnor Chester Road, we have not made recommendations, south of here on Radnor Chester Road. We know ideally that you would have a sidewalk. However, one of the things that you'll see in the more detailed plans I'll be showing in a moment is that there's a seamless connection with the tap trail, so that people from the Radnor Trail, they can actually do this today. They can come on the Radnor Trail and then go down the tap trail, cross here, and then continue out to the school and beyond to the train stations and elsewhere.
The next question, actually, there's two. I don't remember being contacted, and my property is at the confluence. And I think Dennis touched on this. Is there a
What do
fourth
they
option?
mean?
Put in down ramps for the trucks and put a narrow tunnel under the road. And, we're going to look at them, but I don't know where the confluence is. Are you talking about at Radnor Chester and the trail regarding the confluence?
Well, I'm guessing that that's what it is.
Yes,
All I know is
and the answer was yes.
yes. Okay. And the answer is that, to our knowledge, the township contacted, you could see we had all the properties listed, and that information was sent out, for all the meetings on that. And that's was documented in the feasibility study, what was sent out and to whom and so forth. So that's there. The answer is, if for some reason someone did not hear about it, or they moved in 3 years ago and the meetings were held 4 years ago, that's one reason we're having this meeting, so that if someone is not up to speed on this, or wasn't aware, or somehow they got missed, or the letter got eaten by the dog or whatever, that we can listen now while there's still time to answer any questions. This property here at 117 Radnor Chester, we know was up for sale. At one point, the township was even looking at it. What I would say is that we did look in coming up with this scheme to cross Radnor Chester, is that if we put a tunnel under here, you would still need a ramp to get up to the tap trail. And you would still, if you build a ramp to get down to do the construction for the trucks, you would need a massive retaining wall here, which would be extremely expensive, almost as much as a bridge, because it would have to withstand the loading of completely full triaxle trucks with gravel and other things being brought in. So that's probably not practical in terms of expense of what, this has to be approved by PennDOT and the funding sources.
And Bob, here's another one on Radnor Chester, and I think you kind of addressed this, but Bob, you say you're familiar with Radnor with traffic. Do you live on Radnor Chester Road? This street is so dangerous that if my children wish to visit a friend directly across the street, we have to drive them.
Yes.
And again, on the one resident, I have been here for 20 plus years, was not contacted. So to Bob's point, if that did not occur, as this project ramps up, we will, and thanks to Commissioner Jones, we'll be holding these. But please note, if your property is adjacent to the proposed trail, Bob has been out there, and we will gladly meet with folks one-on-one to discuss that. Next one. Many of these meetings were held years ago. It's been some time between when we had meetings in this presentation, and I think Bob did speak to that. Well, now that actually for a few years, this project was somewhat in limbo while we were getting funding, and then we have the issue with the contaminated soil. So as the project ramps back up, this meeting is just one of several others. Radnor Township's very good at being transparent, and we have a lot of town hall meetings on various projects with the stakeholders. So this will just be one of a few coming up. And then another one here, Bob. Our common driveway exits right at the trail access. I have a hard time believing that the line of sight is adequate for a safe crosswalk. Cars fly around the corner heading towards Lancaster.
I can't type my question, otherwise I would. So my apologies for breaking in. I walk that trail in the afternoon every day, basically. So not the trail. I come out, thanks to some very kind neighbors. I'm able to take the back way from my property and then come up basically where the trail begins. And so I walk down the ramp and then cross at the crosswalk to go down to Chew Lane. The idea of putting, if I understood correctly, the idea of putting possibly two blinkers that close to each other and trying to picture that with the afternoon traffic on that road, I just think it's going to create chaos and backed up traffic.
Thank you for that. Along the same lines, and again, I guess I'm the reader. Would we respectfully be able to see the feasibility study? I have concerns over the PED crossing. Did the study reflect span over the time of year and day, line of visibility of cars going north versus south? The approach going south is on a fairly significant incline, and focus of cars is relative to side of the road, not straight ahead. I moved in 7 of 2020, so it was not aware of the plans. So what we'll do, we have posted these in the past. What we'll do, we'll make sure that we have a spot on the website in the engineering department webpage that has these, and I'll request that Dennis send that link out to everybody who was on the meeting. There were definitely meetings several years ago. I will say that I was nearly struck by a speeding BMW when crossing Hatch Crosswalk on a bike. Needs to be more definitive than what at the end of Chew Lane. So I think we've heard loud and clear. There is some concerns with an at-grade crossing, and we take everybody's concerns very seriously. So we will, one of the things we're going to do, we're going to provide some of the information we've got, some of the feedback from PennDOT, and like I say, from what Bob said, yes, this seems to be the most feasible, but that doesn't mean that this is a done deal, and I don't want everybody to think it is. We will present other options to the Board of Commissioners, obviously at varying costs, and at one point, a decision will be made, and it will take into consideration everybody's concern. So I think I've caught up on the chat questions.
Had there been
Yeah, and just
people-
let me know if you need any help reading the questions. I'm happy to help.
Had there been people there, someone there observing the actual traffic and the speed of the traffic at different key times of day? Because I think I heard an earlier assessment of it that I think seemed to me underestimated the speed of the cars on that road and the volume. And both are higher than many of us would wish they were, but.
So here's another question along those same lines. Those studies were completed prior to Penn Radnor expanded, and with the Radnor High School morning starting later in the day, it is a major choking point. I think there needs to be an update of the feasibility study along the same lines. If there is going to be two separate crosswalks across Radnor Chester Road, then speed bumps should be considered as a means to keep traffic slow between both crosswalk points. And I'm sorry, referencing back Penn Medicine Radnor. So that goes back to these studies were completed before Penn Medicine Radnor expanded.
Right, and I corroborate what Steve's just said, that the project really went on hold back in 2019. And the reason was the cost of the culvert put it far beyond budget. The truck culvert that would carry trucks. I will tell you, as a designer and also as someone who bicycles and walks every day, most places, having a grade separated crossing is the most desirable situation, along with ramps to connect to the local community. You don't want to have a crossing where there's no way to get to people's homes or to their place of business or worship or whatever. But I would also say that things having, the other thing that Steve mentioned was the discovery of the arsenic. And that's also something that's going to have to be looked at budget-wise. Now, the county was very generous, and I'll show you in a moment the amount of funding that they have provided for this project. But we're actually really waiting another week or two to hear the report, and then there'll be a month to 6 weeks of decision-making process of how what's the best recommendation for ameliorating the arsenic contamination. When the plans, then that will tell us how to go ahead and complete the plans, and that will all be subject to PennDOT review. And along with the review would be the warrants, as they call it, for the crossing. They may have a different opinion these days. So that's something that, everyone will know about, and you'll certainly have a chance to participate in, the decision-making process there.
So what we'll do, folks, again, we have a lot of information on our website, and sometimes it's not the easiest to find. So I think making sure that everybody knows what we've done to date, we'll gather all our information, not just this plan, but feasibility study, basically from when the project started. And like Bob said, it dates back 8 years. And we'll have a central location under the projects on the engineering website. We'll make sure everybody gets a link and knows it's out there. We'll make sure that Commissioner Jones has that link so she can send it out if she wishes. And Bob touched on two important things. Yep, PennDOT's going to take a look at this. There's no doubt. Maybe the counts have changed since Penn Medicine Radnor is now open. That's a distinct possibility. We also now have a traffic adaptive system that was paid for by Penn Medicine in this area, basically from Radnor, Chester, and 30 up to King of Prussia Road and 30 and around that loop. And that's something that will be taken into consideration. And again, as Bob said, we know there's two ways to go to remediate the arsenic, or maybe a combination of both. And we're going to get feedback on that. But again, we're going to go to the commissioners, because when this trail was initially envisioned, obviously this contaminated soil was not part of the equation. So these items change the cost of the trail, not to mention just time and inflation. And while I'll talk, we have another one. So we've tried speed bumps. PennDOT will not allow. That is correct. This is a state road. They have very specific requirements for speed humps, and this most likely would not meet it. It is not just for Radnor Chester Road residents. It is a safety issue for all township residents who currently use the trail with young children biking. The safety risks will dramatically change the appeal of our hike and bike trail. Again, I thank everybody for their comments. Bob, I will, with my 24 interruptions, I will turn it back to you, my friend.
They're not interruptions. We're here to listen and discuss. Let me go. We just have a couple of pictures of the drawings underway. So there are just a couple things that we're taking into account. I would also just say about my colleagues at PennDOT. People say things about PennDOT. When Blue Route was proposed, I heard awful things about PennDOT. The reality is that PennDOT has come a long way. And I would tell you the people that we have the privilege of working with there are by and large fully committed to the vision that the state has and the policy now of making things as easy to walk and bicycle as they are to drive. And that's not the case now, right? If I want to walk down to Conestoga Road to a shop, I take my life in my hands, and that's not the right thing. So I think the issue is, working out some solution here that doesn't create congestion. At the same time, it gives people the access that they're really looking for. The other thing that's important, this is the existing trail. And right now the TAP trail goes down here along the west side of Radnor Chester Road. This is the ramp that we're proposing. And then here you are down in the cut. One of the things that we would have to do is make sure that there's an ADA connection between the trail, the Radnor Trail, and the TAP trail. So there's a trail, this would be the TAP trail. And then because there's an elevation difference between the road and the TAP trail, we'd have a ramp that comes up here and then a crossing. These green dots with the purple boundaries are the areas where the arsenic concentration was found, and where last month there were additional drilling cores taken to see what the depth of the contamination is, both in the middle and on either side of these dots. Let's go to the next slide. So going along, this is in the cut. You see here's one, and then there was no contamination for a long way. And then a few here, a few here. And then you get to the end, and right at the end, and just before that, there's some more. So there had been an initial survey for contamination just for its location. And then the next thing that's been done last month was going down to see what the depth is. And obviously, if you have the area and you have the depth, you all know from studying mathematics that that will give you the volume of soil that you're talking about. And that's what we'll be reviewing.
Would you go back on those again, please? You went so fast.
Oh, certainly, gladly. Here, this is Radnor Chester Road. The total length of the extension is about 3/10 of a mile. And there's a scale on here. There it is. This is 40 feet from here to here. So that gives you an idea where things are. All right. Do you want to see the next one?
Yes, please.
So this is continuing along. And here are the numbers of the adjacent properties: 6 Meadow Crest, 11 Meadow Crest. On this side, 207 Radnor Chester. So we've shown those boundaries, and you can see here there's one location here, and then you can see the right-of-way widens out. This is the culvert underneath which Brown's Run goes. And one of the things we did, we have our civil engineer, Jeff Case, and one of his assistants actually went through this whole culvert and analyzed it to assure that it was not in danger of any kind of structural deficiency, to carry the trail. You hardly notice it when you're walking here because the stream is so far down, but there is a concrete culvert here, and we have photographs of the whole thing. The right-of-way widens out because the embankment, spread out that allowed the culvert to be built here over Brown's Run. Should I go to the next slide?
Please.
Let's see what happened.
Bob, did you go to the same typing school that I went to?
Actually, I went to my father's typing school. Every child in my family had to learn to type proficiently in junior high school.
I went to
So-
Catholic school. It was an IBM Selectric.
Oh, there you go. I had a 1917 Underwood typewriter, and I was very proud when we studied the Balfour Declaration in history class to see that it was the same font. So it was probably the same typewriter used in Palestine. But anyway, looking at this, let's go to just down. Yeah, there you go. And there's the last piece of it, about 100 feet of trail to this point.
Hey, Bob, I'm going to read a couple more questions that have popped up.
Sure.
So folks, pardon me interrupting. I just think this is the best way. If not everybody's monitoring the chat, at least everybody can hear the question and Bob's reply or staff's reply. So if the plans go forward for this to connect to the Hines National Park, the majority of the traffic will be bikes, and they come in groups. It will increase the incidence of accidents in that spot. Is that what Radnor Township wants, a major accident spot? I think it means if a death occurs here, the trail crossing may need to shut down. So I'm going to talk, when we're done, I'm going to wrap it up with a few takeaways, and I think I get everybody's concern here. Question on a different vein. What is the plan for the trees? There are many that are dying from the ash bug. So I'm going to jump in on that. So all our projects that we do, we take to the Shade Tree Commission. And this is no different. I don't know where the trees that are dying from ash. So our project area, if you will, is going to be what Bob basically just outlined for everybody on this plan here. So within there, once a final design as far as slopes and excavation is agreed upon and approved by the board and everybody involved, then at that point, we're going to look at impact to trees. So any trees impacted by the project proper, if they are viable trees, we revert back to the township's shade tree ordinance, which gives us a replacement formula, compensatory plantings. Trees that are ash trees under our ordinance, it was amended about 5 years ago. No permits are needed to remove an ash tree. You can just remove them and there's no compensatory trees. So when we go through this list of what we affect, the ash trees come out. Now, we're not going to go on to private property, if you will, to address trees. It's just trees within our project area. And then we have to see, can we fit compensatory trees in? Luckily, Bob Thomas is not just a trail guru. They're great landscape architects on their as part of their thing, part of their company. Next question. Where does the trail end? Can't tell from this slide. So Bob does have that slide. Bob, could you give context to the
Yeah, so
cul-de-sac?
I'll go back to the overall context slide. Whoop. Right, so the drawings that we're looking at was here, here, and then here at the end. Here you can see the ramp to go south on the blue route. So this is where the trail ends. I guess you'd say it's right across from the track there at the high school. Yeah, the other thing I would say regarding trees, we just had to do a certain amount of clearing just to get the drilling rig in. A lot of the trees that we're concerned about are trees that have grown up and are failing and are falling over, or have large limbs that are decayed and will fall onto the trail. All that has to be worked out with the Shade Tree Commission, and that will certainly happen. Our landscape architect is a marvelous guy, Tim Wilson, who's also an expert in trails, as are we. That's how I met Tim 20 years ago, and he's really very sensitive about seeing that things are done correctly. So we'll have a lot to report.
So Bob, the cul-de-sac, the end of the trail is what, about 300-400 feet from the entrance ramp to the blue route?
That's correct. The reason for that is that the PennDOT asked, they own this old rail bed simply as land. What they're saying is until we actually were to build a bridge, they don't want us working in the limited access right away. That's why it stops there. And I guess what I would say, if you go down on many trails, and I'll specifically, if you happen to be down in Philadelphia on Schuylkill Banks and you go down the Schuylkill River Trail, the trail was extended a couple of years ago down to the level of Christian Street. And you get there, just dead ends, and there's a sign, trail dead ends, dash temporarily. And they have a big map of where it will go all the way to Heinz and down to Key West and everything else. So what we find is that in this situation, if people are out using the trail, they'll often go down to the end just to enjoy it. It's very pretty back here.
To Bob's point, we did meet with PennDOT how many years ago, Bob, regarding a pedestrian bridge over the Blue Route? And that was
Yes.
some time ago.
Yes, we did. Well, if you go way back, I think you still have the 1983 study we did. Before the Blue Route was built, we highly recommended that when the Blue Route got built, that they put in culverts for a future trail, and that was rejected, unfortunately. It was done on the Chester Valley Trail. As Route 202 was turned into an expressway, they put in culverts that sat there for about 15 years, and then when the Chester Valley Trail came along, they just opened them up. But so we have a lot of things to make up for. The other thing, as far as the mix of uses here, yes, there will certainly be more cycling when this trail is more than 2.5 miles long. But we realize that a large part of it is pedestrian activity. People are going short distances. The other thing is the trail, although it's the paved trail, is about 10 feet wide. There's a companion crushed stone trail, and that's really for jogging and walking. So this is wider than just your normal circuit trail. And that's because the right-of-way was quite large. This was planned to be 4 tracks, so there's enough room down here to do that. And that's the same thing that was done on the existing trail. There's I think a 4-foot shoulder on one side and a 6-foot on the other.
Bob, I have a couple more questions.
Sure.
How, where, and when can/will the Radnor Trail connect to the other trails, such as in Montgomery County, Chester, and Philadelphia counties, which have many more trails?
Let's go back to the circuit map. By the way, I do have, just so we don't forget, to see this support that this has received, let me just jump in for a second. Radnor received a grant from Department of Community and Economic Development, their Greenway Trails and Recreation Paths, $50,000 they got from the Community Conservation Partnership Program of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, a $232,000 grant. And then that was in 2019. Then things really got stopped because of the cost of the culvert, the arsenic. But now, knowing all of that, the township did just receive in December the announcement of a grant for $407,454 from the county. So the county is very supportive of this. Let's go back to the regional map, just to give you answer your question. And this is really something I'm speaking about as the co-chair of the Valley Forge the Heinz Refuge Trail Alliance. We're in communication with all the communities up and down this whole corridor. The answer about going north to Montgomery County is right here. This is Upper Merion Township. There's the boundary. So this is all in Tredyffrin Township until you get to Upper Merion. And Tredyffrin is doing a lot of trail work, just like Radnor. And we're keeping in touch with them now that things are moving on the Radnor Trail down here. We'll be meeting with Tredyffrin soon to find out, what they're doing. And I also, I do attend typically the monthly meetings of the circuit, so I keep up to date on things that way. As far as going down in this direction and tying into the Cobbs Creek Trail, which is managed by Philadelphia Parks and Recreation, this is going through Radnor and Haverford Townships, and then a little bit of Upper Darby. Upper Darby can't wait. They're doing 3 trails right now. They're involved with Valley Forge Heinz Refuge, Nailers Run, and the Darby Creek Trail. But to connect to Montgomery County, I would say we have to work things through with SEPTA and PICO, and then Haverford Township is 100% supportive of this. They want to see this very, very much. But we really have to work out a lot of technical aspects with SEPTA, and we're in the middle of a study on that right now. I'd say completing all of this is probably, knowing how long these things take and just seeing how, a thing like arsenic has delayed this 2 years, I'd say this is at least about 7 or 8 years away. There's a lot of design. This part here could happen very quickly because the Cobbs Creek Foundation is working on the revitalization, spending a lot of money on the Cobbs Creek golf course. And we're in discussions with them and Philadelphia Parks and Recreation about the perimeter trail around that, which would then, and this is all under construction or completed now. So that's where that goes. This part here is being built by the Clean Air Council, and then you're at John Heinz.
Okay, I have a couple more questions, and actually, so there is a deer crossing under the Blue Route, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and here we go. This is another question regarding, and I think I could take this for the group. I understand how this trail fits into the big picture. For those of us on Radnor Chester Road, what are the PennDOT acceptable methods of slowing traffic? What are the considerations other than a flashing light? The Radnor police love slowing traffic down while sitting in our driveway, but that's not a great solution for the long term. They write the most tickets per hour on Radnor Chester Road than any other place they sit. Just ask them for the details. So when we talk about traffic, actually, this is like 2 items. There's traffic calming, which is used on roads to slow traffic generally in certain segments of the road versus, and I think one of the other residents had noted that speed humps weren't allowed. So there's traffic calming, and then there's pedestrian crossways and how there's how we alert motorists to pedestrian crossways. What Bob had talked up about the light is actually what we call a rectangular rapid flashing beacon.
That is
One of
correct.
them can be seen on South Ithan Avenue, where South Campus crosses Ithan Avenue for the kids to get up to main campus. You'll see it is exactly as it sounds. They are rectangular, very rapid flashing beacons. They're very eye-catching. There's one in Bryn Mawr. There's others around also. We're going to be putting one on King of Prussia Road near the school at one point.
Are they always on, or are they triggered by a
So
signal?
they can be triggered manually or by motion detection, right? But they're not always on. They would lose their effectiveness. So, and that question really goes back to what Bob had said, is what happens when we meet with PennDOT, right? So PennDOT has very, very clear standards for pedestrian crosswalks, what you can do, what you can't do, and what the requirements are. So that is something we're definitely going to be focusing on.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, what I've seen change at PennDOT is there are times where you've all seen going around the suburbs where you get to an intersection and there are no pedestrian crossing signs on every corner. For me, as a designer, I'm very concerned. I'm concerned about that because the reality is people keep crossing. I see a no pedestrian crossing sign as a cop-out. Rather than solving the problem, you put a sign up and say, oh, well, we told people not to cross, but meanwhile, Jerry, who's 15 and he's going to the library, he's going to cross there. So, or I may be out for a walk and do that. You see people in lots of communities in Radnor and the other suburbs. So what's happened though at PennDOT is they realize that, saying, well, you just shouldn't do that is not the answer. So they're coming up with a lot of alternatives. The nice thing about the Radnor Trail is the railroad was built to a very high standard and had no grade crossings. So the entire trail now, from Radnor Chester Road all the way to Sugartown Road, has no at-grade intersections. The Chester Valley Trail, on the other hand, was a line that was constructed before the Civil War when the railroads didn't have a lot of money, and it has one grade crossing after another over Route 401, over this, over that. And PennDOT worked very closely with Chester County and with Montgomery County on that section to come up with answers that work. They didn't want to just say you shouldn't do this. On the other hand, you don't want to endanger people. So I would say that as hopefully we get some good answers on the asbestos or the arsenic rather, that we can work within budget and move the trail forward, and then the trail design would move forward, and we would be working with PennDOT. I'll just tell you, as an advocate, I always want to see something grade separated in a situation like that, if it's at all possible. So
Bob, I'm going to get to some more questions, and then the commissioner has her hand up. So let me get through these questions. Before track right-of-way sounds considerably wider than what I remember discussing previously. What will the cleared width be?
Oh, the cleared width for the trail is about, let's see, 10 and 6, 16 with the 4-foot, about 20 feet.
Next question. I saw a map that had a loop connecting to Brown's Lane. Is that still planned?
The answer is I don't know.
So I can take that one. So I talked to one resident about that. So as you can see, these projects take years to come about. So the first step in lengthening the trail will be to get this portion of the trail complete. So really what we need to do is get this portion of the trail complete, and then we can look at feasibility, cost, and ultimately funding for additional trail, for an additional extension to the trail. And I know that this does interest a few folks. Spoke to a couple prior to the meeting. So for right now, for this immediate future, the project is this trail extension, and this would be the first step to doing anything further. To connect with the Valley Forge Hines Refuge Trail, will you need a bridge over the Blue Route? That must be an exorbitant cost. And you keep talking about the cost of the culvert under Radnor Chester. And yes, that's an exorbitant cost. I think we kind of touched on that about the bridge, but that's something we did discuss. I was at the meetings with Bob and our team. The culvert under Radnor Chester, that's a different option than the at-grade crossing. And again, those things are gonna be presented to the board and further to this group and to the public. How do you get across the 2 southbound entrance lanes, the 6 lanes of the Blue Route, 2 northbound exit lanes, and a bridge to tie into the Route 100 line in Villanova?
Could I say a word on that?
Please do.
Because we've taken some very preliminary looks here in the office and talked it around. This crossing is essential. This is the the exit ramp from southbound 476 and the entrance ramp to southbound 476. However, when the Blue Route was constructed, they left space for very wide sidewalks on both sides. So one of the things we've looked at as an alternative to crossing all of these lanes here, and also there's issues too of, homes having been built over the right of way, perhaps, who knows? But one of the things we looked at is if we came down this way, and yes, there's a traffic light here, there are people walking here, and went under the Blue Route, and then we actually got down to the SEPTA right of way and came up to the SEPTA right of way there and had a bridge over Sproul Road. That's one option that might work, but that has not been studied in detail, but I'm just saying we're keeping our minds open about all alternatives right now.
Okay, next question.
And that's
Is it
not a
then-
project the township is doing right now. That's simply, the advocacy work of the Trail Alliance, which is looking at the whole picture from Valley Forge to the Heights Refuge.
Is any additional parking planned to accommodate the extension and presumably additional use?
We did talk about that. There was talk of additional parking up here at Capelli, and then having a trail spur that came down and joined the Radnor Chester Road here. So there has been discussion about that.
That is correct. And also at one point, that property that Bob Thomas noted right to the north of the trail on the east side was the topic of a 3-lot subdivision by Bentley Developers. We did talk to Mr. Bentley about perhaps donating land to the township. That never came to fruition, and ultimately his project did not move forward. But that is, as Bob said, that is on the radar. So I'd like to ask, there's I would have a few things to end with, but before I do that, I do want to make sure, does anybody have any further questions on what Bob has put forth?
Well, I would offer one micro observation in terms of pedestrian safety. As I mentioned earlier, I go down that ramp and then cross at the crosswalk at Shoe Lane.
Down here, yeah.
Yeah. Now, at that point, when I'm going toward Lancaster and crossing kind of right or left to right, before I cross, I would say the ratio of cars that are coming toward me from Lancaster stop at a pretty high rate when I'm in the crosswalk. When I'm coming back the other direction, I don't know whether it's a visibility issue or what, but the cars coming that are coming, whatever that is, north, down that stretch,
here,
they've got a head of steam coming up, and virtually none stop at for me when I'm standing in the crosswalk. So I don't know. It may be visibility. It may be the fact that they've just, as I said, gotten a head of steam up and they're headed down there to Lancaster. So
appreciate that observation. Another question, is the Leeming property being considered for additional parking? I can tell you no, we have not looked at that for additional parking at this point. As you can see on Bob's map, there's a big chunk of and there's a good from one of the residents. I'm glad to see that. And I think what Bob Thomas noted as, using Enki or some existing township facility as a further trailhead would be a prudent way to move sometime in the future. So I'm going to, again, by no means is this the end if somebody has questions, but if there are no questions, I'm going to take a look at some takeaways from this conversation, from this meeting. So first and foremost, we want everybody to know this is not the only meeting. This is not one of two. This will be one of several meetings that hosted by Commissioner Jones or part of public meetings at Board of Commissioner meetings. And we'll make sure that we keep everybody abreast. And Commissioner Jones is great at getting the word out to her constituents. One of the things we need to do, we're going to put up on the website, basically the history to date, some of the older studies, these plans, some actual, and we're going to note on the plans, preliminary, not for construction. These were just the plans we have were pretty much done prior to finding out what we did about the arsenic. Another takeaway, obviously there's really, really large concern over a pedestrian crossing on Radnor Chester Road. And I want to let you know, we hear you loud and clear. Again, when the time comes, we're going to talk to PennDOT. We're going to get their input. We're going to go to the Board of Commissioners. And we have two commissioners on here. So they hear the very close, the residents who live very closely to the project. We hear your concerns on Radnor Chester Road. And we will, and as Bob said, there's some very, some of the other ideas would be very costly, but it's still our job to present them, right? So I don't want anybody to think that it's, oh no, we're doing this ag-grade crossing. We will present these options regardless of the cost, and then the discussion will take place. Just while I'm talking, we have capped the arsenic. There's no benefit in removing it, no harm in leaving it in situ. Also, I can see we are going to update our township map to show what we have installed to date and that interconnectivity. And again, this is just one meeting. The project is moving forward again. We have a lot of regulatory items to deal with. We have outside agencies such as DEP and PennDOT that we're going to be working with to do this. So provide more information to all the stakeholders. That's going to be on the website. Hear you very well concerning Radnor Chester Road, and we did talk about other methods. We are going to update our map. Again, at one point, it's a little early. We will be going to the Shade Tree Commission. And when we do that, I can tell you, we go with a table. And in that table will be every tree that is affected by the project, its genus, species, condition, diameter, breast height. If it's removed, does it require a compensatory or compensatory trees, one or more, or none if it's an ash or a considered a failing tree. So I want to thank everybody for coming on, and I'd like to just, if Commissioner Jones has anything, or Bob in closing, to
I
tell
just
the folks.
wanted to say real quick, you know, in terms of safety concerns, I always think too that crossing in, I guess is it Upper Marion, around 202 South Warner, Old Eagle School Road. And what I'm always so blown away by is that, you know, like there are railings, there are painted ways, and that really draws the motor vehicle, the vehicle driver, the vehicle's attention to what's going on. And you just slow down based on the fact that you're seeing this from, you know, several feet in approach. And I'm wondering if that's something we're considering doing. I think that really makes a difference. I don't even recall any flashing lights at those intersections. Bob, can you speak to that?
So are you talking about like down by the Southeastern Post Office, Commissioner, on West Valley Road?
No,
And-
even further over. Well, actually, yeah. So it's there, and it's also by 202. You know, where like the 470, not 476. You know, I can't even remember. There's like a huge intersection not too far off of Croton.
Yeah,
Road.
I live right near there. And yes, I know what you're talking of. And not to get too much into details. So when we meet with PennDOT, all these items are on. So one of the things you're seeing is what we call continental crosswalks, which look
Okay.
like piano keys, right?
Right.
And we are slowly but systematically converting the existing township intersection crosswalks to those piano keys, if you will. And that is something that would be, that's almost really, that's actually a standard nowadays, moving forward on crosswalks. We have the lights. There's other methods, and I think everything is on the table to do that. And just when the sidewalks on the Radnor Chester Road, that was just another comment. So everything would be on the table. And I don't want to force Bob or myself to commit to anything to really, till we meet with PennDOT, get their observations, get their input, and also go back to the board at one point. And like I say, we have an advocate here in Bob Thomas, who obviously is our consultant, who's paid to do this, but he is a huge advocate of pedestrians and biking. So we all take everybody's safety very, very, very heavily into whatever we do, right? Nobody wants to see anybody get hurt.
Yeah, we
Couple
had another,
questions here.
I'm sorry.
So
Yeah,
I
Steve,
apologize, Bob. So I've been told I have a face for radio, but you're actually looking at my face and I'm reading off. Sidewalks on Radnor Chester Road might make the trail more accessible to residents who can't walk to the trail safely. Understood. I think you should try to come. I think you should try. I'm sorry. I think you should come try to cross. I think that what this is saying is, I think you should try to cross the 2-lane crosswalk at 4 to 5 p.m. As John said, no one coming northbound stops. And we fully understand everybody's concern on Radnor Chester Road. Got a lot of good input here, a lot of real life observations, and that's all going to be used moving forward in our progress in this project.
One of the things I have to say, then I have to go. I don't bike or walk on the trail itself anymore for just my own physical reasons, but it seems to me inevitable that the nature of the use of an elongated trail will be significantly different, and you'll be attracting, I think, some serious bikers, and I think there's going to be a lot more bikes on there, and I think the result will be a less neighborly stroll way, because I think the idea that the crushed gravel is what families usually walk on, that's not my experience. They walk on the blacktop. Crushed gravel is not a great thing to walk on, and I'm just concerned that the feel of it, and I know I sound antediluvian bringing this point up, but the feel of it now is it's kind of a neighborhood walkway and bikeway, and making it part of an interstate, I think will shift the usage of it, the type of use of it, and not for the better. And maybe this is just bemoaning something that's inevitable, but it's not an improvement in my view.
Well, I think one answer to that is that the 6-foot crushed from stone shoulder, you can also look at different materials that are still pervious, because we did that in order to deal with stormwater. If you've been down at, say, Valley Green, Forbidden Drive has it's not a hard surface, but it's done with very fine material in a way that I know my wife, who has walking problems, really likes walking there. Because it has some give to it in a way that asphalt doesn't, or concrete. So that would be one thing. The other is, I think your concerns are valid, that yes, there will be changes, that people would suddenly discover that they could get to Valley Forge in a half an hour by bicycle, and they don't have to drive through traffic. So you will.
And then parents with strollers will discover it's not a good way to take their kids out on a walk.
Well, I think that the issue also would be, there's room there in a sense to make improvements so you have a wider trail area and you can separate things. I mean, there are strategies that are taken. I would also say on the issue of the culvert, the one thing that we didn't mention was a lot of time and effort has been spent looking at what would be involved in building the different trail alternatives. And one of the issues that came up with the culvert was, you would probably, because underneath Radnor Chester Road, you have a water main, you have a major gas line. If you have the crossing, we don't have to move anything. We talk to the water people, and their water line comes over and then goes underneath. We don't have to do a minute of work. All that stuff can just lay where it is. If we have to start moving water mains and other things, and in the long term, I certainly see the benefit of that, but we're talking about potentially, a several months long shutdown of Radnor Chester Road. And that was a problem that we would have to address also when we get back to PennDOT and looking at alternatives, because, it's not just what you end up with, it's the impact during construction. And one of the things that obviously we always want to do is to minimize that impact for everyone. So that would certainly be looked at as well. But I just wanted to say that is an important consideration that, and a lot of thought has been given by the township already on that. And we'll be certainly talking with PennDOT. The other thing I would say is that if you go out on the Cross County Trail in Montgomery County, which branches off the Schuylkill River Trail at Conshohocken and was completed all the way to Germantown Pike a few years ago. It's been there for about 10 or 12 years. We're involved in, it was an analysis of how to get across Germantown Pike. And initially, when we started looking at it a few years ago, PennDOT said, oh, we're putting in, a continental crosswalk and pedestrian signals. And we were standing there and looking at the situation. And I simply said to our friend from PennDOT, I said, would you send your 11-year-old to the library using that crosswalk? And his answer was, let's build the bridge. And that bridge has been funded across Germantown Pike. It's a similar, very long bridge, not unlike what would be used to cross the Blue Route. So the same thing, Mr. Bowers, could happen, and other people concerned about that. The same thing could happen, that there would be more funding put in when we look at the current, situation, to say, probably the best solution is a ramp up to Radnor Chester Road to tie in with the TAP trail and a culvert that goes underneath. And that would be my preference if it could be done, within, a reasonable cost that would be funded. It was not funded when we were looking at that.
I would agree with that, by the way. I think that's, I mean, as I'm picturing the alternatives that you've described, that seems to be the one that would be the least disruptive and the safest for the people in the immediate area.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Very good.
Commissioner, do you have anything in closing you'd like to say? I don't mean to.
No. I just want to thank everyone for joining. I know that there are a lot of concerns, which there should be, but I think that it will be handled correctly. I mean, I'm always blown away when I go to that intersection that I just alluded to, and I see how safely people are crossing, given, it's a very precarious intersection. People are getting on highways, and it's just pretty amazing how this can be done if it's done correctly. And I think that, we have the prowess of Bob Thomas and you, Mr. Norsini, and I think that, we will get there for sure. So I'm excited about it. And I thank you for coming. And I also want to give a shout out to Ann Wilmerding for giving me all of the emails so that we could facilitate this. Thank you so much, Ann. And I thank everyone for joining.
Okay, I just have one other thing. That is, in terms of our strategy for getting input, has always included a site walk. We did a couple of them during the feasibility study, and one more recently during the design we started back in 2019. So we would certainly be doing that again.
Okay.
And I think it's a lot of fun, but it also, you can actually, it's one thing to point to something on the map. It's another thing to stand out there and take a look.
I would love to join the site walk.
And the neighbors were
Excellent.
very kind in giving us access to the trail, the Wilmerdings and the Hansons. And I would certainly imagine we could do that again.
I think you should walk from John's house down Radnor Chester Road to do your site visit. That way you'll get a really good handle on the traffic on Radnor Chester Road.
Well, Steve Rossini will tell you how many times I've left the township office, taken the trail, and ridden my bike on Radnor Chester Road, probably easily 150 times to get back to train stations or go where else I'm going. So I hear you loud and clear, believe me, and I will do everything I can to try to get, the best, safest trail that can get built within the limitations of the budget of PennDOT and the township.
Well, again, I'd like to thank everyone. Thank Commissioner Jones, Commissioner Borowski, Bob Thomas, Dennis Capella, and most importantly, thank you all that came on, all the residents that are around the trail. We're here for you, right? So I just want everybody to understand that this team is here for the residents of the township to work with you to get this trail built. We appreciate all your input. This may be the first time we've met in a long time, but it will by no means be the last time we meet. We will be meeting in person and virtually, and we have an offer from a resident to, kick off from their house for a trail walk as well as with Bob. So again, we're going to provide more information on the topic on our website. Very much understand the concern of Radnor Chester Road, and we're also going to update our trail map, the Radnor specific trail map, to show what we've completed to date. So that might make things a little easier.
And again,
And I
please
thank
follow,
Commissioner Jones for hosting.
and again, please, any follow-up questions, be happy to hear them.
There may be a maximum number of, a practical maximum on the number of people who could be on a Zoom conversation, but I thought this worked really, from my standpoint, well tonight. And although the faces have disappeared, I just want to say hi to my neighbors. So Lynn, Lisa, Charlie, who else? Jim, yeah. So
Hi, John.
nice, yeah, exactly. Good evening.
It's a good way to see each other, isn't
It's amazing. Yep.
it?
All of a sudden, beautiful women are appearing on my screen. It's my dream realized.
Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. And like we said, please contact Dennis if you have any questions, and he will facilitate answers to
Very good.
everybody. All right, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you,
Yes,
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
good night.
Thanks, Ann, for coordinating.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
See you.